This is Compass's Prelude to Rebellion, Mobilization and Unrest in Lower Canada, 34 to 37. After having enjoyed the Canadian Civil War, the old SPI game, a bit over the years, I think it's issues or whatever, the idea of, hey, a Canadian situation that actually led to a little bit of armed action is somewhat more interesting, perhaps, to me. Maybe not. We'll see. Well, I was intrigued by the idea, but what kind of kept me away from it was the, hey, this is another Twilight Struggle type game. Compass has done a couple of these. I also have what I enjoyed quite a bit, actually, was Europe in Turmoil down there. We don't know about this one yet, but boy did they go all out on the production quality on this one. Which is a little strange to me, because this is also such an offbeat topic. I mean, I wasn't even aware this had happened. I don't know how many, I'm assuming our Canadian viewers are at least somewhat aware of that there was some sort of unrest. Once again, this centers around the French-speaking side of things. Now, let's take a look at what we have. It's been a little while since I read the rules. I'm a little dizzier than usual. But we'll take a look at the different components, etc., and what they give us. First of all, it's Canadian Christmas. A lot of these pretty green and red ice cubes. I like them. Again, this is a hard-mounted board, bunches and bunches of cards, high-quality counters that you pop out. They've got no flash on them at all. A couple of player aid cards whose only purpose is to remind you what these counters do and to put them on here. I'm actually a little surprised this isn't a bilingual game like Canadian Civil War is, but it's harder to justify extra page printing at this point. One player aid card for each player that gives them what you can do in a turn. And for some reason or another, this bag, which doesn't serve any purpose in the game, it's just a storage thing, some special dice, and these are different. You select which one you want to play. They each have basically one thing that they're more weighted towards, which is the black value. And you have, in some cases, you're forced to roll a certain one. In others, you have some option as to what you can roll, if I recall correctly. Bunches and bunches of tracks reflecting various counties within Lower Canada. The major cities are represented here and here, but they have so much track importance to the game that they're sort of situated off to the side because of their additional importance. This little flag indicates which way any particular county leans. These are Montreal and Quebec are considered the urban counties. The others are considered rural counties. Organizations are going to be, they have to start in the cities and then they're exported out to the rural counties to help them organize. External influence is going to be relating to gaining support, possibly from the United States or from Great Britain or other factors that have an influence on Canada. You have a fixed turn track here, unlike in Twilight Struggle. Twilight Struggle has the scoring cards concept. Here, the decks are not separated by scoring cards or anything like that. And, okay, important things here, the rebellious spirit. The further this goes up, the more the separatist side, or francophone rights side, perhaps, is upset with the, the colonial government that's in place, and the more they're causing issues. The higher that goes, the more problematic it can be for the idea of advancing those rights. Now, if it rises fast enough, apparently it's possible, like, if it basically jumps over the red areas, it's quite possible that a rebellion could be successful, and you might see, like, Lower Canada actually just leave. On the other side of things, though, if it can be held down for a long time, points can be scored over a longer period of time, and the game, a calmer solution can be come to. The likely historical situation, which may be very likely, given that I'm going to be playing kind of, without much knowledge, is that as this rises up, if it gets stuck in here especially, what happens is the British get more and more, the colonial government gets more and more prepared to just crack down on it, and they eventually can just sweep in and take over. And they have a war readiness, which is a representation of, how capable the government's going to be to squelch things. And then over here, well, how do you win? Yeah, that's an interesting question. So you have a victory point chart here, and if somebody gets to the end of the chart, that's the game. And that's how, if you can keep the problems, the more vociferous and active rebellion down, that's one way that the so-called Patriot, that's the name of the party, versus the Loyalists, would get a victory. And you gain these victories by success in the rural counties, success in the organizations, external influence in urban counties, and basically this marker moves along. Once it hits the score track, then you get victory points based on what your location is here, and you can see the rural counties especially are very far over in favor of the Patriot. And then what happens is you have some special impact from that. So for example, in the urban counties, one of the things that happens is the more victory points you got, the more it's in your favor, the more things kind of move towards the center. And each of these has their own mechanism for resetting. But yeah, most of them it's just jump back, I think. Again, it's been a little while since I read the rules. All right. The cards are broken into 4 decks. You have the generic deck up here, which will be drawn from in every period. And then you have a 34 deck, which I have set up here, and then decks for 35 through 36, and then one for 37. And each of these gets shuffled, and then they get allocated in a kind of mixed sort of way, and you'll see how that happens. There are also these key events, which are going to go down here into these opportunity pools, where players have the option to pay opportunity points. Yeah, like I remember where everything is. There, here we have them. To pay opportunity points in order to use them. The game also has a mechanism, so also some cards go directly into the opportunity point pool, or the opportunity pool, at the beginning of each year, well, at the beginning of each turn. I guess not all turns are a year. In fact, so there's like 2 turns in 34, there's 2 turns in 35, 36, and there's 3 turns in 37. Also, if you remember from Twilight Struggle. There is a mechanism in this game where a card can be one player's, or neither player's or the other player's. And that's a situation where if you play a card for its action points, that's the other player's event, if it's legitimate to play it as the event gets triggered by that. If it's not, you give some opportunity points, half the points it would cost to play that card, to the other player, and it goes into the opportunity pool and is then available for that player to purchase during their turn. And by purchasing the cards from the opportunity pool, they can avoid playing cards that they're stuck with in their hand they don't want to play. So there's a lot of interesting crap going on there. Okay, the setup is fixed at this point. The one thing that's going to be different, once you start a turn, you get cards going into the opportunity pool. And in 1834, I'm going to be taking 2 cards from the current deck, and I guess 2 cards from the generic deck, and they go into the opportunity pool, just available for people to purchase. And you get more opportunity points each turn. And other turns, you get different things there. You also get any key events that are selected for that period. So in 1834, we're going to get the general elections key event, which on action rounds 6, 7, or 8 can be played. It's got a prerequisite, and it causes victory points to be scored if you have mobilization values that are high in these counties. The cards themselves have a number of different things. This is going to be the die that it controls. This is the action points that it gives you. This indicates it's a key event, the name, prerequisite, the effect of the event, the year that it comes out, the player that it involves. Just to scramble things up a little bit. Okay. Then each player is going to draw 4 cards from the active deck and 3 cards from the generic deck. So they have a 7-card hand mixed from the 2 decks, guaranteeing them a certain mix. And then the Patriot player decides who gets to go first that turn. Now, you're going to be alternating playing cards, essentially. And we'll get into the meat of that in a little bit, but we want to look at what the end of turn effects are. What happens when you reach the end here and finish any given turn. Some cards will end their effect or come into resolution at this point. The key events get discarded from the opportunity pool if they're still sitting there. Both players get 6 and 8 opportunity points, but they're maxed out at the end of the chart. If the rebellious spirit marker, this thing, is over on this side, it will flip over. If it was not on that side, it moves up a space. So the rebellion continues to gather support the longer the game goes automatically. And once you enter turn 15, or space 15 on there, the game will end. If this is the last turn for a deck, all players lose all the cards from their hand. The opportunity pool will be cleared. Otherwise, you keep whatever you have in your hand, and you will get new cards, I guess, at the start of the next turn. It's a little weird, because the cards that you have in hand are going to impact what you have left. So for example, the Patriot player held a card from the 1834 deck. This held card carries over to the start of the late 1834 turn, and the Patriot player would draw 3 cards from 1834 and 3 from the generic instead of 4 and 3. So the types of the cards that you held are going to actually limit what you get in your new draw. And at the end of winter 1837, if the game hasn't ended yet and you're there, the game ends. Okay. So the game ends in one of the following ways. If the rebellious spirit marker enters or reach level 15, you'll be going through a scoring sequence on each of the different scoring tracks. The war readiness victory points are awarded to the loyalists, and then whoever's ahead wins the game, and the loyalists win ties. If at the end of a player's action round he's reached 20 victory points, the game ends, he won. The last one is if you reach 1837 winter, you go through a scoring sequence for each of the tracks, and then you don't count the war readiness because there's no rebellion or no crackdown on the perceived rebellion, as the case may be. And at that point, whoever's ahead of the victory points wins. If there's multiple victory conditions that could happen at one time, for example, this is triggered on winter of 1837, they follow the order going through here. Okay, so if the rebellious spirit marker reaches 15 and you reach 20 victory points in the same action round, you actually do not get your automatic victory. The crackdown happens first. And the winter 1837 is the last option. Okay, so what happens when, how do you play the game? In your action round, you play a card from your hand or from the opportunity pool. If you have no cards in your hand, you can pass, but that's the only time you're allowed to pass. If you play a card associated from your faction in your hand, you can play it as either the event, if it meets any prerequisites, or you can play it for its activity points. And in general, the cards will be discarded, although some events may not be. If you play a neutral card from your hand, you can play it for the event or for its action points, same as if it's one of yours. If you play a card from the opposing faction, you can only play it for activity points. If the event's prerequisite is met, the opponent then must play it. And it's in his favor to do so, but he may want to delay it or something. He can't. If the event's prerequisite is not met, the card goes into the opportunity pool, and the opponent gets opportunity points equal to half the activity point value of the played card. Okay. If you play a card in the action round, you roll the scoring die that's associated with it. We'll get to that in a bit. But each one of these has an appropriate scoring die. So RC would mean I'd be picking the one that has black RCs on it. Okay. There's some specifics as to how to interpret the different wording there. Okay, to the scoring die. So the 4 scoring dies match the 4 scoring tracks. After you play the card play is complete, you'll get to roll the die. It's rolled even if the card is played from the opportunity pool, and the Patriot activities and loyal activities cards specify that the scoring die gets to be chosen by the particular player. How is this played? Essentially what happens is you roll that scoring die, whatever letter comes up moves that track 1 space. If it hits the scoring space for one of the tracks is scored, and any cleanup takes place. The dice are weighted in favor of what they say. So for example, the RC die has 3 RCs on it and 1 of each other. They could have done this with less dice, by instead of making 1 die for each scoring track, made one with 3 asterisks on it and just said, whatever the appropriate type is what comes up there. Whatever. Okay, the different scoring tracks. First, let's look at the rural counties. This track measures the player that controls the most of the rural counties. You move the marker to the Patriot side when the Patriot player takes control of an uncontrolled rural county, or when a rural county controlled by the loyal player becomes uncontrolled. Control is specified way back in 1.1, and we missed that. Okay, so whoever has the most cubes controls it. That's what I thought it was, but excuse me. At the start of the game, the pitcher, Okay, on the scoring sequence for this, the loyal player rolls die, applies the relevant die roll modifier to the rebellious spirit track. We do the fear of reprisal table here. So you roll a die, you apply the modifier to the left here. Right now it's at -2, but it goes up to +4. And let's find this again. And references the final number of fear of reprisal. He then removes Patriot cubes from rural counties based on the indicated result. This is basically pressuring the farmers to get back and toe the line, Then, whoever has the bonus there, and remember, by removing some counters, you may have changed that number, gets that many victory points. And then the scoring marker gets moved back to the end. So one of the things with the game is because the dice control the scoring, you can't really tell which track is going to be activated the most, but you have some control over it by the cards you play in terms of balancing things towards one track or another going more. The organization track. Whoever has the most organizations will be benefiting from this. Now, there aren't a lot of organizations in, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, there are. Never mind. There aren't a lot of urban county spaces. You can create one urban organization, the Patriot can create one urban organization, which must be in Montreal. The Loyalist can create two, one in Quebec and one in Montreal. And each time you create an urban organization, the organization's track moves 2 in your favor. Once you've created any urban organizations, you can create rural organizations. These allow you to move the advantage marker 1 box in your favor. Now, when the organization track scores, you get victory points equal to where you're sitting on the organization track, and then this thing gets reset, and that's it. External influence. This is the support you get from external powers, including Upper Canada, by the way. And you just score the victory points and then reset the track. The urban counties. You move the marker to the Patriot side when the Patriot takes control of an uncontrolled urban county, or when an urban county controlled by the loyal player becomes uncontrolled. It goes to the loyal side. And I believe each county is basically worth 2 victory points. You'll see some of these others. So this is like 2, 4. Oh no, 2. So these are each worth 2. These are worth 1. These I think are worth less than 1. 4, 4. Okay. So it's got a staggering type of movement, kind of like we had in 1862, except that the numbers don't change. When you do this, as I noted, there's an attrition based on how many total cubes you have. Now, is that per county? I believe that's per county. Yeah, 7 cubes in Montreal, 4 in Quebec. He loses 2 in Montreal and 1 in Quebec. Okay. The Rebellious Spirit track. Now, what has not been clear here is how you create the organizations. When we play a card for action points, we don't have an order of what you do with action points, do we? We do not. That has not been explained yet. Okay, good. Okay, the rebellious spirit is how much the Patriots are close to an uprising. Some events will boost that, a few will lower it. Many have a prerequisite based on that. Once the number reaches 8 on there, the loyal can actively try to increase it by recruiting volunteer corps. When it gets to 15, the game ends, and there'll be an armed revolt. At the end of a turn, unless the Patriot player performed the call for compromise action during his turn, the marker moves up 1 space. During the game, some victory point markers go in the war readiness box. If there's a revolt, those will help the loyalist. The fear of reprisal table, every time the rural counties track scores, a certain number of cubes get removed, which might be none. The opportunity pool is where the cards can be played by both players. When cards are placed in the opportunity pool, they sit there. Okay. They're placed in the pool at the start of the turn when you play a neutral card from your hand for activity points. Oh, I missed that. Yes, okay. So if you play for activity points, you put the event into the opportunity pool. Neat. Makes sense, otherwise, I don't know. So the events are always being given an option to be played, unless it's your own event and you don't want to play it, I guess. I don't know. Because the neutral ones are given an option anyway. If you play a card from the opposing faction and the prerequisite is not met, the event goes into the opportunity pool. Key events go away at the end of a turn. Other events are discarded at the end of a deck. During your action round, instead of playing a card from your hand, you can spend opportunity points to play an event of the card. The opportunity points is going to be the activity point value of the card, and the prerequisites have to be in play for you to cause the event to happen. Okay, mobilization check. This is done to see if the county is sufficiently organized to do an action. There are 2 types of mobilization checks. Event triggered. Sometimes you have to make a mobilization check for an event. When an event has a mobilization check, the check's bonus will be specified on the card. Okay? We'll see. Action triggered. Some are available to players. Some actions require a mobilization check. In that case, the number of activity points dedicated to the action will be the check's bonus. For example, if a player decides to use 3 activity points out of the 6 activity points provided by a card to create a rural organization, that check will have a bonus of +3. To perform a mobilization check, you add the check's bonus to your mobilization value in the targeted county. And I believe the mobilization value is running along the side there. No, that's something else, if I recall correctly. I don't know. Do we have a... Oh, mobilization value is how many cubes you have. Yeah. Okay, so you add the check's bonus to the mobilization value in the county. That becomes your target number. You roll 3 dice and compare the sum of those dice to your target number. If you roll less than or equal to the target number, you've made a successful check. If you roll greater than the target number, you can either agree that the check was a failure or spend additional opportunity points to bring yourself up to the right level. And they're 1 for 1, so there's no reason to ever spend extra opportunity points at the beginning when you first have to make the roll. Okay. When you play a card for activity points, you get the card's activity points, and you can perform a number of different actions. Mobilization is the most common. This allows you to place cubes going up the tracks. The activity point cost will depend on whether it's rural or urban, and the next free box in it. Mobilization in rural normally is going to cost you 1 action point. However, you have to pay the additional white number next to that to mobilize into that box. If, however, your mobilization value in a county is lower than your opponent's at the time the cube is entered, you pay 1 less activity point, but it's always at least 1. So you can negate some of the pluses to the activity points. Okay, mobilization in urban counties. For these, the base cost is 2. They have white numbers that are an additional cost, and there is no catch-up bonus on those tracks. Okay. Gotcha. Creating organizations. You have to spend at least 2 activity points to create organizations. This will become the mobilization check's bonus to create the organization. If you fail to create an organization, you can't create any additional organizations for the rest of your action round. You can only have 1 organization in a county, and that's these org markers. You must have an urban organization before creating any rural ones. The Patriot can only create in Montreal. The Loyalist can create in both. To do this, you target a legal urban county and perform a mobilization check using a bonus equal to the number of activity points dedicated to the action, at least 2. If you have a success, you move your organization advantage marker 2 boxes in your favor. And remember, go sideways, up, down, I guess. So where are we there? Rural organizations. To create a rural organization, you choose your activity box there. Once you have an urban organization, now you're allowed to create rural organizations. To create a rural organization, you choose however many activity points you want to spend. You target a rural county that doesn't have one. You select an urban organization which you're going to affiliate it to. You perform a mobilization check using a bonus of the activity points, plus 1 if the mobilization value in the affiliated urban county is 6 to 10, or plus 2 if your mobilization value in the urban county is 11 or more. Okay. So you get additional bonuses based on how good your urban organization is. And a success allows you to move the urban organization advantage 1 space in your favor. The Patriot can do a call for composure only once per turn. It costs 2 activity points in 1834, 4 in 35 through 36, 6 in 37. And what's this? The goal of this is it flips the rebellious spirit marker over, so it won't automatically increase at the end of that turn. Okay. Volunteer Corps recruitment. Only the Loyalists can do this. If the rebellious spirit marker is 8 or more, you can start recruiting Volunteer Corps. In the rural counties, where there's a loyal rural organization in which no Volunteer Corps has been created yet. And I guess you flip this over once the Volunteer Corps is created. Okay. You target a legal rural county and do a mobilization check using a bonus equal to the activity points. You flip the organization counter to the Volunteer Corps side to indicate you can't do it there again. So even if you fail You can't do it again, it looks like. Oh no, if the check is a success, sorry. You flip it, you roll a die. On a 4 or more, the rebellious spirit marker goes up by 1, and you get one of these into your war readiness. Okay. Special actions. Once per turn, you can do one of these special actions on the player board associated with your faction. You take the counter beside a used special action to the current action round on the turn rack to remind you that you've used it for the you can't use it again for the remainder of the turn, for the remainder of the game, and that you've used a special action during this turn. You're going to have to pay a certain number of action points to do a special action. Okay, let's take a look at some of these. Governor's Privilege. Okay, pulling the strings. You roll a scoring die, and you roll X scoring dice of your choice. You decide the number of dice you'll roll, spend the AP, and each die is rolled and resolved one at a time. If a track scores, the scoring occurs before you roll any additional dice for this. For 2 AP, you can do Strategic Realignment. After your action round, you exchange your cards in hand with those of the Patriot player. This sounds like a really dangerous thing, but okay. Non-issue, reset a scoring track. You put the track's scoring marker back in its start box. Really, really powerful. Somebody's about to score a track that you really don't want them to score. You know, they're like on the 3 spot or whatever. Boom, you just kill it. Looking for trouble. 4 or 6 action points. This will add 1 or 2 to the rebellious spirit. La Canadian. Next time you play a card of the opposing faction from your hand, you ignore the event. You pay the action point, roll the scoring die, and then discard the card. Even if the event's prerequisite is not met, the opposing player doesn't get anything out of it. They don't get op points, they don't get a chance to play it, they don't get anything. Partisan Media. Next time you play a card of your faction from your hand, you play the AP and then the event. If the event's prerequisite is not met, the special action was wasted. And those cards, these counters will have like a spent side to them. Okay, for the Patriots, for 4 or moment, they gain 6 opportunity points. Boom, like that. Now, obviously, at the beginning of the game, that puts you to the top, which might mean you want to spend some ops before you play it. Overwhelming support for 4. Score 1 victory point for each of your fully mobilized Patriot-biased counties. That would be 1 victory point for each rural county with a Patriot mobilization of 9. I guess that's fully, all the cubes in the space. No matter the cost, the next time the rural county's track scores, the loyal player does not roll fear of reprisal. And that has a spent marker side to it. Various angles. 2, 4, or 6 action points. Exchange 1, 2, or 3 cards from your hand with 1, 2, or 3 non-key event cards from the opportunity pool. You must have at least the chosen amount of cards in hand, and there must be at least the chosen amount of cards in the opportunity pool. Le Canadian, same as the Governor's Privilege one, which was ignoring the event. Partisan Media, same as the Loyalist one. You're able to play both the AP and the event. Okay, parliamentary sessions. Some of the action rounds count as parliamentary sessions. An event can have the prerequisite parliamentary, which means it can only be played during a parliamentary session. After the last action round of a parliamentary session, contiguous or individual action rounds with the parliamentary session icon, which is this little bill type thing here. We have 2 in a row right at the beginning. That's where they're contiguous. Okay. After the last action round of the parliamentary session, you add 1. The Patriot adds 1 cube in Quebec and gets 2 victory points. This is because while they're doing Parliament, they're proselytizing and getting some extra power there. Okay, we've got something in case a random county has to be determined. It includes a not-so-random player choice option. We've got some specifications on the different cards. An example of play. Let's see what else we got here. Designer's notes. This was kind of interesting because it didn't go too much into many of the choices. Again, I'm never sure. I find it interesting to read designer's notes that are like, this is about my life and, what this game started out as and why it didn't end up being a military game about the something that was an overwhelming victory for the government. Well, that's all interesting. But honestly, I wish people would take their designer's notes and use them to look at the hard choices that they had to make more than this tends to do. There's a little bit of it here. This section is basically about that. Some strategy, not a lot of history. And then this looks like stuff from the player aid card. So that's that. I'll send it up, and I'm really unlikely to play this tonight because my voice is shot, my throat is dying, I'm up too late already. But I could not sleep. The illness somehow is making it harder for me to sleep. All right, let's send this up.